My life seemed perfect from the outside. A beautiful house with a large garden, a pool that sparkled in the sun, a hard-working husband, and a son about to graduate from college. But behind closed doors, the reality was very different. My marriage to Mike had cooled over the years. He spent most of his time at work, and when he was home, his attention was focused on his phone or the television. Our conversations had dwindled to mere exchanges about bills, food, or our son Eric's schedule. I felt invisible in my own home, trapped in a routine that was slowly eroding the woman I once was. It was on an ordinary summer day that my gaze fell upon Marcus for the first time in a different way. Marcus was Eric's best friend, a kind and self-assured young man who had been visiting our house frequently for months. Until then, I had never paid him much attention. However, that afternoon, while washing the dishes in the kitchen, I glanced out the window and saw him standing by the pool. His skin glistened in the sunlight, and his body, athletic and strong, reflected the vitality of youth. There was something about the way he moved, the confidence with which he carried himself, that took my breath away for a moment. It was so different from the aloofness and exhaustion that Mike had been radiating lately. I shook my head, trying to push those thoughts away. He's just a kid, I told myself. But from that day on, something inside me had changed. As the weeks went by, Marcus started spending even more time at our house. He would stay up late playing video games with Eric. They would work out together in the garage, and sometimes they would just relax by the pool. I couldn't help but notice him whenever he was around. I was aware of his laughter echoing through the house and the scent of his cologne lingering in the air after he left. I wasn't seeking him out on purpose, but whenever Marcus was near, my body reacted with a restlessness I couldn't explain. The first significant contact happened one day when Eric went out to buy something and Marcus came into the kitchen to get a glass of water. I was preparing dinner when his deep voice startled me. "Mrs. Blake, may I have some water?" I turned around, a little taken aback. "Of course, Marcus. And call me Amanda, please." "Thank you, Amanda." He smiled, that perfect, carefree smile that made my chest feel warm. As he took the glass, our hands brushed for a brief second. It was a tiny touch, but a shiver ran down my spine. I quickly pulled my hand away, hoping he hadn't noticed my reaction. "Sorry," he said with a soft laugh. "It's okay," I replied, feeling my cheeks burn. When he left the kitchen, I had to lean against the counter, trying to control the thoughts swirling in my mind. What was happening to me? I was a married woman in my 40s, and yet here I was, feeling like a teenager with an impossible crush. That night, after everyone had gone to bed, I sat alone by the pool. The moon reflected on the water, creating soft glimmers on the surface. I hugged myself, trying to convince myself it was all nonsense. Just a passing whim, I thought, none of this really means anything. But deep down, I knew it wasn't true. There was something undeniable between us, a spark I couldn't ignore. I decided I had to push those thoughts away, focus on my family and my marriage. But as the days went by, I realized that avoiding Marcus would be nearly impossible. He was everywhere, filling the spaces of my house with his presence, his laughter, his gaze that, on more than one occasion, made me wonder if he felt the same way. What started as a small distraction soon became something more. And although I knew in my mind I was playing with fire, my heart longed to feel alive again. That night, when Mike and Eric left for the baseball game, the house fell into an eerie silence. I told myself it was the perfect opportunity to relax, to enjoy some peace and quiet. I picked up a book and settled on the sofa with a glass of wine, but my mind was anywhere but on the pages in front of me. The sound of soft footsteps pulled me from my thoughts. I looked up, and there he was, standing in the doorway with a glass of water in his hand. "Would you mind if I kept you company for a while?" he asked calmly. My first impulse was to say no. That it would be better if he went home. But the words never left my mouth. Instead, I nodded. Marcus sat at the other end of the sofa, initially keeping a certain distance. But the tension between us was undeniable. The air was heavy, as if every particle in the atmosphere was pulling us toward each other. I tried to concentrate on my book, but my hands were shaking. "You seem nervous," he commented with a slight smile. "I'm not," I lied. Then, with a gentle but decisive gesture, he took the book from my hands and set it aside. "Amanda, you don't have to pretend with me," he whispered. Hearing my name on his lips so casually, without the distance we had always maintained, I felt my self-control crumble. I looked at him, and I knew there was no turning back. He leaned in slowly, as if giving me a chance to stop him. But I didn't. I closed my eyes, and in an instant, his lips met mine. It was as if a floodgate had suddenly opened. Weeks of pent-up tension, of furtive glances and accidental touches, exploded in that kiss. His mouth was firm yet delicate, and his hands found my face with a tenderness that sent shivers down my spine. I didn't think about Mike, I didn't think about Eric. In that moment, only Marcus and I existed. We moved from the sofa without realizing it, as if desire were guiding us effortlessly. By the time we reached my room, there was no doubt about what we were about to do. His fingers traced my skin with a reverence that made me feel beautiful, desired. Something I hadn't felt in years. The hours that followed were a whirlwind of emotions. I surrendered completely to him, leaving behind the barriers of reason and duty. There was no rush, only the need to explore what we had been denying for so long. But when the ecstasy faded, reality crashed down on me like a ton of bricks. I lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, feeling the weight of my betrayal crush my chest. "This can't happen again," I whispered, though deep down I wasn't sure I believed it. Marcus turned to me and gently ran his fingers along my cheek. "Do you really believe it?" he asked calmly. I didn't answer. I couldn't. Because I knew the truth, I wanted him again. And the worst part was, he knew it too. The following days were a whirlwind of conflicting emotions. I tried to convince myself that what had happened with Marcus should stay in the past, that I should cut off all contact with him. But every time I saw him at home, every time our eyes met, the desire reignited within me like an unquenchable fire. We had become careless, little brushes as we passed each other in the hallway, lingering glances that lasted too long, the way his voice lowered when he spoke to me. They were tiny details, almost imperceptible, but at the same time, they were too obvious. And that's how Mike began to suspect. It all started when she found Marcus's sweatshirt on a chair in the dining room. I was in the kitchen when I heard his voice behind me. "Marcus left this here." I turned around quickly, feeling fear paralyze me for a moment. "Yes, he must have forgotten it after dinner," I said as calmly as possible. Mike stared at me for a moment. But he didn't say anything else. He simply left the sweatshirt where it was and left the room. However, his silence made me feel even more nervous. That night, I barely slept. I tossed and turned in bed, with a feeling that something was about to explode, and I wasn't wrong. The day everything fell apart started like any other. Marcus had come over to spend the afternoon with Eric as usual. They were playing basketball in the garden while I made dinner. I tried to keep busy, to ignore the growing anxiety inside me. But when Marcus came into the kitchen to get some water, I couldn't help myself. Our eyes met, and in that instant, the tension between us was undeniable. He took a step toward me, and without thinking, I did too, just one step, for an instant. But it was enough. The back door swung open. I turned, and there was Mike. His gaze shifted from me to Marcus and back again. His face was a mixture of confusion and barely contained rage. "What the hell is going on here?" His voice was a sharp crack in the air. I tried to reply, but the words caught in my throat. "Nothing, Mr. Blake," Marcus said quickly, his tone calm but tense. Mike took a step forward, his jaw clenched. "Don't lie to me, kid." "Dad, what's wrong?" Eric's voice came from the doorway. My whole body tensed. No. It couldn't be him. He couldn't be a witness to this. "That's what I want to know, son," Mike replied without taking his eyes off me. How well do you know your best friend? Eric frowned, confused. What are you talking about? Ask your mother, Mike said with a bitter laugh. Eric looked at me. His eyes, those same eyes I'd seen light up since I was a child, now reflected something different. Doubt. Fear. Mom. His voice trembled. What's Dad saying? I wanted to speak, to explain. To lie. But my silence said it all. Eric took a step back as if he'd been punched. No, it can't be. I tried to approach him, but he raised a hand, stopping me. Don't touch me, he shouted. The wound in his voice was worse than any blow. Marcus looked down, not knowing what to do or say. Get out of my house, Mike said, his voice low but sharp as a knife. Mr. Blake, I told you to get out. Marcus hesitated for a second and then, without another word, left the house. The silence that remained was unbearable. Eric looked from his father to me, a mixture of anger and pain in his eyes. I can't believe it, he whispered. Mom? With my best friend? I wanted to explain, but how? There was no possible justification. Mike let out a bitter laugh. How long, Amanda? A few weeks, I replied, my voice barely audible. God, Mike ran his hands through his hair in fury. With a boy who could be our son. It wasn't that simple, I exclaimed, tears streaming down my face. Don't give me excuses, Mike shouted. You made a decision. One that destroyed everything. Eric shook his head, saying nothing more, and ran out of the house. Mike looked at me one last time, his expression filled with a pain I had never seen in him before. I don't know if I'll ever be able to forgive you. And then, he was gone. I was left alone in the kitchen, feeling my world crumble around me. The days after that night were pure hell. Eric stopped speaking to me completely. He barely came down from his room, and when he did, his gaze would rest on me for only a few seconds before he looked away with contempt. Mike, for his part, moved into the guest room. Between us, words were few and sharp, limited to the bare minimum. The house, once a home, now felt like a ruined battlefield. I looked in the mirror one morning and barely recognized myself. Dark circles under my eyes, swollen from crying, lips trembling with remorse. I had been selfish, seeking in Marcus an escape from my own loneliness without considering the consequences. Now, those consequences were devouring me alive. I tried to talk to Eric several times. I stood in front of his door, took a deep breath, and knocked softly. Eric, please, let's talk. Silence. Sometimes I heard him moving inside, but he never answered me. One night, after several failed attempts, I found him sitting in the living room, the television on, but not paying attention to the screen. I mustered my courage and sat on the sofa across from him. Son, I know you're angry. You have no idea how I feel, he interrupted, his voice thick with barely contained rage. You betrayed me, Mom. Not just Dad, me too. His words struck me like a knife. I didn't mean to hurt you, Eric. But you did, he shouted, standing up. You did from the moment you decided to sleep with my best friend. How could you? I covered my face with my hands, feeling the tears welling up again. I don't have an answer that can fix this, I whispered. I can only tell you that I'm sorry. I wish I could go back and undo it all. Eric looked at me. His expression was still hardened by anger and pain. I wish I could too, he said before going to his room. That was the last conversation we had for weeks. Mike, for his part, wasn't ready to forgive me either. Although he agreed to it and it was couples therapy, each session was a reminder of how much I had damaged our relationship. I don't know if I'll ever be able to trust you again, he told me one night after we got back from therapy. I understood. Over time, things at home found a fragile balance, but they were never the same again. Eric finished college and as soon as he could, he moved to another state. He gave me a quick hug the day he left, but there was still distance in his eyes. Marcus disappeared from our lives. One day I saw him in a coffee shop, and when our eyes met, he just lowered his head and walked away. Mike and I are still married, but only on paper. The connection between us died the day I betrayed him. Now we're housemates, sharing a roof but sleeping in separate beds. I learned the hard way that a moment of weakness can destroy an entire life.